Alors c'était, vous êtes encore là, s'il te plaît.
La selección argentina tocando ahora. Otra vez adentro con Alexis. Deja la pelota para Italia. El tiro libre y para Suiza. 10 minutos finales de la primera parte. Con la pelota.
Bueno, está como loco Scaloni, ¿eh?
Good morning, it's Monday the 13th of July. You're watching Euronews and this is Europe Today. Welcome to the program, I'm Stefan Grobe. Coming up, war or no war? Hours after the US conducted new airstrikes in Iran, Tehran unleashed waves of major simultaneous missile and drone attacks across the Gulf on Sunday. This came days after President Trump announced peace talks would continue. Meanwhile, in Qatar, former Emir Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani has died at the age of 74, the father of the current ruler. Qatar declared a period of national mourning until Wednesday. Sanctions or no sanctions? EU foreign ministers coming together in Brussels today are considering whether to restrict trade between Europe and illegal Israeli settlements in the West Bank. Several member states have called for measures to make Israel comply with international law. An import licensing regime, higher tariffs, and a trade ban on imports are options on the table. We'll have our correspondent Angela Skujins at the EU Council building. How to redesign farm support after 2027 without weakening either rural livelihoods or common European standards. How to tackle food security threatened by the wars in Ukraine and Iran. And in light of the ongoing debate about the EU budget, is Brussels asking farmers to do more with less? Questions for the president of the EU Agriculture Council, Irish Minister Martin Layton, who'll join us on set. And the deadly wildfires in Spain seem to be stabilizing. Authorities in Andalusia allowed 1,500 people who were evacuated to return to their homes. Calmer weather conditions, including lower winds and higher humidity, have helped firefighting crews as they have worked to bring the blaze under control. The wildfire killed at least 13 people in Spain's Almeria province. But first, the situation in the Middle East. Over the weekend, the United States and Iran have exchanged more strikes as tensions in the Strait of Hormuz are boiling over. Washington and Tehran are now making contradictory statements about the status of the waterway. Let's head over to Doha, where our correspondent Laila Humaira has the latest for us. Good morning, Laila. So that was quite a weekend in the region. Bring us up to speed, please.
Good morning, Stefan. Yes, that's right. Gulf nations have once again found themselves on the front lines of this conflict and confrontation between the U.S. and Iran. Now, overnight, the U.S. conducted new airstrikes on southern Iran, prompting Tehran's retaliation against U.S. bases in the region. Now, just 24 hours ago, countries like Bahrain, Kuwait, the UAE, and here in Qatar had intercepted a barrage of missiles coming from Iran and activating those national emergency alerts. Now, Washington, on its part, said that those airstrikes it conducted in Iran over the weekend was in response to a ship that was attacked in the Strait of Hormuz by Iran. Now, here we see time and time again the events unfolding in the Strait of Hormuz become either a major sticking point in the negotiations or a major escalation point in the aggression and conflict between the US and Iran. So that's where we stand, a heightened state of alert all over again in the Strait of Hormuz, and a big question mark over what this all means for the negotiations and peace talks. Stefan.
And the Iranian attacks on the Gulf countries also came at what would turn out to be a sensitive and somber time in Qatar with the passing of the former ruler of the country. Laila, what's the mood like in Qatar right now?
Yes, unfortunately, hours after intercepting those missiles from Iran, Qatari officials on Sunday morning announced the passing of the former ruler of Qatar, Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani. Messages of condolences have been pouring in from global leaders, heads of states, and it's worth noting that on the same day Qatar intercepted those missiles from Iran, it also received messages of condolences from Tehran through Abbas Arachi, the foreign minister. Now, the late Sheikh Hamad is the father of the current Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, but he's also known as the collective father of the entire state of Qatar, known as a visionary and essentially the architect of modern day Qatar. So having said that, the mood here in Qatar this week will be one of a somber mood and one of reflection, reflecting on the life, the legacy, and the wisdom of a well-respected figure whose ideas and values helped shape Qatar and will continue to guide the country well into the future and for generations to come. Stefan.
All right, Laila Humaira in Doha. Thank you for this update. A fight is brewing ahead of today's EU Foreign Affairs Council meeting in Brussels, where ministers are expected to debate whether the European Union should restrict or even ban trade with Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories. For more on this, I'm joined by our EU correspondent Angela Skujins, standing by at the European Council building in Brussels, where this debate is expected to occur. Good morning, Angela. Why don't you just fill us in, please?
Good morning, Stefan. So yes, as these ministers stream in behind me for a Foreign Affairs Council meeting in the Belgian capital, I'll give you the backstory as to why this meeting is expected to be a spicy one. Last week, the EU executive, that's the European Commission, presented an options paper to the 27 capitals regarding what a crackdown on EU trade with illegal Israeli settlements could look like. This was first reported by Euronews. There is a certain precedent for this to occur. The last time the 27 EU heads of state met in Brussels for a European Council summit, they released a statement at the end conclusions unilaterally condemning Israel for its ongoing expansionist activities in the occupied West Bank, while calling on that country to uphold its obligations under international law to protect those Palestinian communities. On top of this, we've heard the European Commissioner for Trade, Maros Šefčovič, as well as the EU's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, stating these Israeli settlements undermine peace as well as the two-state solution. But what is on the table today are three potential options, the most controversial of which being a partial or outright trade ban between the EU and those Israeli settlements. But we're not expecting a concrete decision to be made today, but an opportunity for the European Commission to gauge the temperature among those foreign ministers regarding what option could be taken here.
And Angela, it wouldn't be a wild guess if I said the discussion will become heated, right?
Yeah, so we know that there's opposition among certain member states, such as Germany and the Czech Republic, to take a more cautious approach. But there are stronger voices, particularly coming from Belgium, Germany and the Netherlands, for this outright trade ban. On top of this, those certain member states want the 27 out of 27 to vote in support here, raising the bar, versus qualified majority vote being 15 out of the 27, lowering the bar here. So not only are we expecting the debate to centre around what approach should be taken, but also how this approach should be taken. But as these updates come through, we'll be providing those to our readers on Euronews.
All right, Angela Skujins at the European Council for us. Thank you very much. Today, the Hungarian parliament will vote to amend the constitution, which mostly aims to remove the country's president, Tamás Súlyog, whom Prime Minister Peter Magyar has called Viktor Orbán's puppet. This forceful and certainly unusual approach has drawn concern from several NGOs and advocates for the rule of law. To make sense of it all, let's bring in our Hungary expert, Sándor Síros. Good morning, Sándor. Good to see you.
Morning, Stefan.
So, Sándor, why is Magyar targeting the president, and what comes next?
So, Magyar wants to start a new political era in Hungary after his landslide election victory in April. And as you said, he wants to remove all of the, what he calls, puppets of Viktor Orbán, so key officials holding power behind the scenes, so the president, the chief prosecutor, the president of the media authority, because he wants to establish a new system. And now you know what's going to happen. Today the parliament will surely approve these constitutional amendments because the ruling party has supermajority, and then the president has 5 days to sign or not to sign these constitutional amendments. If he is not signing it, the parliament could withdraw his mandate, so I expect him to be out of office next week.
Sándor, honestly, we don't see every day that a president, a head of state, is being removed after a change of government in an EU member state. What has this to do with democracy? And is the EU Commission or the other EU institutions, are they doing something about it?
Indeed, this is a very interesting question, and it's a little bit paradoxical because, first of all, I don't recall any other EU countries, firing, kicking out a sitting president from the office by a government. So this is something new. We never seen this before. But on the other hand, the Hungarians knew this because it was a key electoral promise from Péter Magyar. He said it many, many times. If he comes to power, he will kick out this president. So people actually voted for this. So it's also legitimate in a way because he has a lot of support for doing this. On the other hand, the opposition, Viktor Orbán's Fidesz party, thinks that this is the first step towards a dictatorship. They called for a protest last week. And on the other hand, what you asked about the European Union, so far the European Union is completely silent about this. They are saying they monitor the events. In my view, they are silently approving this move because they support Péter Magyar's government to make this democratic turn and to go towards the EU values.
All right, Sándor Síros, as ever, great stuff. Thank you very much. As geopolitical tensions drive up energy prices and Europe's dependence on imported fossil fuels remains under scrutiny, the debate over the continent's energy future has taken on new urgency. In a special Euronews double interview, EU Energy Commissioner Dan Jurgensen and International Energy Agency Executive Director Fatih Birol argue that Europe's answer lies in accelerating electrification, expanding power grids, and making electricity cheaper than fossil fuels. They spoke to Euronews' Maria Tadeo, who started by asking them how they would reassure European citizens and businesses.
So your message for Europeans who, again, they look at prices at the pump and they're going, oh, God, here we go again. And European companies is we are not in a situation of panic yet. We can handle the summer.
Well, first of all, we should never be in a situation of panic. I would say panic is not a good place to be. But we are in a very serious situation. And I'm not telling people or companies or businesses or decision makers not to be worried. There is, unfortunately, reason to be worried. But we can act, and we will act. One of the things that I am arguing, that we in the Commission are arguing, and that Fatih Birol is supporting, is we really need to do whatever we can to electrify our economies as fast as we can. Because there's many things we can do to be independent of fossils. Many of them takes years. But electrification is something that you can do and that will have an immediate effect.
Well, the Europeans have also said they will not pay for passage. But as it stands, do you now begin to factor a scenario in which, and I know it's extreme, but do you think $100 a barrel oil is possible? What numbers are you looking at in terms of your new scenarios?
Yeah. It is. There are so many uncertainties, but the uncertainties are not related to energy sector. It is related to the politics and what is happening in the conflict over there. If Hormuz closed again, we may see upward pressure on the prices with significant implications on the economies.
And you have a number in mind? Is in your conversations with the Commissioner, did you say be prepared to this level?
I don't need to tell the Commission is always well prepared, but I can tell you that the entire world should be prepared for the worst case, which we hope will not materialize, but we really need to be prepared for this worst case scenario.
And what does worst case mean?
If the Hormuz is closed again.
And prices go up to a particular level? Where do you see a trigger point?
If you push the prices up, today it is $75 and so on, and it may really push the price up if the Hormuz Strait is closed once again.
What is the key now for Europe to be able to have homegrown energy at an affordable price? Because what companies in across Europe continue to say is competing on the energy front with the U.S., which is pretty much self-reliant, and the Chinese, is very difficult.
So here, the main option we have is electrification. We have to electrify our energy, our economy as much as possible, which means more electric cars, more heat pumps, industry more electrified, and because we can generate the renewables, solar, wind, also nuclear power and others at home here, and therefore reduce our vulnerabilities vis-à-vis what is happening in this country, that country, as much as possible. In my view, this should be at the center of the European energy strategy.
Maria Tadeo there speaking to EU Energy Commissioner Dan Jorgensen and IEA Executive Director Fatih Birol. As wars and trade tensions reshape global markets, Europe's food security is once again under pressure. The conflict involving Iran has sent fertilizer prices climbing, raising fresh concerns for farmers and consumers alike. At the same time, Brussels is negotiating its next long-term budget, with the future of the common agricultural policy at the center of a fierce political battle. For first-hand insights, I'm now joined by Ireland's Minister for Agriculture, Martin Hayden. Good morning, sir, and thanks for coming on the show.
Good morning, Stefan. Good to be here.
Great. So let me ask you, is food security today as important as energy security?
Absolutely. It's, if we look at energy security and the lessons learned from the illegal invasion of Ukraine in 2022, similarly, the discussion you've just had about the Straits of Hormuz and the challenge we have, food security and those vulnerabilities in Europe are to the forefront of everybody's mind now in terms of where we get our core ingredients from. So in terms of the Irish presidency of the EU for the next 6 months, we have 3 overarching priorities of competitiveness, values and security. And from my perspective, chairing the Agri-Fish Council for the next 6 months, security and food security and the contribution of our farmers and our fishermen and women all over Europe is not in conflict with other elements of the security debate, but is an integral part of it.
On that note, farmers say they cannot absorb another spike in input costs. What concrete support can they expect in Ireland and elsewhere from the Irish presidency and from the EU?
So we've seen from Commissioner Hansen the proposals around the Fertiliser Action Plan, and today the response to that Fertiliser Action Plan will be voted on by the Council members at the meeting that I'll be chairing this morning. So we are taking very decisive, clear action very quickly to support our farmers with these significant input costs, recognising the pressures there are on food production from these, price shocks.
And one more on the budget discussions. The next EU long-term budget is becoming a battle over priorities. Is the common agricultural policy under threat?
Well, I see the Common Agricultural Policy and my colleagues on the Agri-Fish Council, the Ministers for Agriculture and Fisheries all over the EU, see the CAP and the CFP having delivered so much for Europe in the past, being an integral part of our future as well. And from a presidency perspective, the development of the negotiations on the multi-annual financial framework will be progressed significantly under Ireland's presidency, and we will act as that honest broker, taking on board all member states' points of view and looking to get council positions to a consensus.
All right, Martin Hayden, thank you very much for being on the program this morning. And now, what's happening at the World Cup? Here we are. What started out as the biggest tournament ever with many exciting newcomers from Africa and the Middle East has become the sole affair of global football royalty. The last 4 teams have all won the World Cup before. In the first semi-final Tuesday in Dallas, twice champion France will play against Spain, the winner of 2010. The French beat Morocco 2-0 to advance. Spain prevailed 2-1 in extra time after a thrilling match against the valiant Belgians. So, a nice match between friends and neighbors? Not at all. Former Spanish Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy had already stoked tensions with racist remarks, saying that there were no Frenchmen on the French team, an apparent reference to the fact that Team France includes players who either have immigrant backgrounds or come from former French colonies. I'm sure the French équipe is now even more fired up. And in the other semi-final Wednesday in Atlanta, triple champion and current title holder Argentina will meet one-time champion England. The Three Lions won the title 60 years ago and believe it's time for a rerun. In the quarterfinal, England beat Norway 2-1. Argentina subdued 10-man Switzerland 3-1. So, Argentina, England and France, Spain, the whole thing remains exciting. That does it for us today. Thanks for joining us this morning. I'm Stefan Grobe. Take care and see you tomorrow.
The cloud spending will surpass the $1 trillion mark in Europe.
You have to love the problem.
Making